14 good boys died, and the 15th, the bad one, survived. Where is the justice in that? A frail old man leaning on a cane cannot vanish without a trace, in broad daylight on open ground. Physically, it is impossible. But that is exactly what happened on June 5th, 2026, in Grant County, North Carolina. 81-year-old Alex Davis stepped out of a car at the gates of an abandoned building on the edge of a forest and disappeared, just like that, as if he had never been there at all. His disappearance was not discovered right away. The hired driver dropped the old man off at the gates and drove into the nearest town to run some errands. He planned to return in a few hours, but something nagged at him the entire time. Leaving a frail, barely mobile old man out in that kind of wilderness, miles from the nearest house, miles from any living soul, felt wrong. After 2 hours, he could not take it anymore. He turned around and drove back to the Cape of Hope. The old man was nowhere. The driver searched the yard, looked inside the building, called out. All he got back was silence and the echo of his own footsteps. On the rusty old swing set in the yard lay Alex's wooden cane, just lying there, neatly, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. The driver called the police. The local sheriff examined the scene and settled on the only explanation that made sense to him. An elderly man had suffered a dementia episode. He had wandered into the forest and sunk into one of the deep bogs that surrounded the area. No body was found. The search was called off after a few days. The case went cold. Officially, Alex Davis is listed as a missing person. But on June 4th, one day before his disappearance, he came to our newsroom. He set an old leather briefcase on the front desk. Inside were 2 items: a worn, linen-covered diary and a VHS tape. On the label, written by hand, one word: Cape. On the first page of the diary, in firm handwriting, it said, "I am going back to those I should have stayed with in 55. Do not look for my body. It does not exist in your world." My name is Sarah Elder. I have been a journalist for 9 years. In those 9 years, I have seen a great deal. But when I opened that diary, my hands trembled for the first time. Because this is not the diary of a madman. This is the confession of a man who spent 71 years waiting for permission to leave. Alex Davis was born in 1945. He had no memory of his parents. He entered the system too young. At the age of 4, he was placed in a children's home in Grant County. The institution was called the Cape of Hope. Those words were cast in iron above the front gates. The director of the home, a short, stocky man with a soft voice and hard eyes, liked to say that this place was a quiet harbor for children cast out by the rough ocean of the world. A shore, a rescue, a hope. For the 15 boys who lived inside, the place smelled like something else entirely. Chlorine, institutional soap, and fear. The 3-story brick building stood at the edge of the forest, far from town, far from roads, far from anything alive. The first floor held classrooms, a dining hall, and the director's office. The second floor belonged to the sisters, the spiritual counselor, and a storage room the children were forbidden to enter. The third floor was entirely the boys, a long shared dormitory with 2 rows of iron beds lined up like soldiers on a parade ground. The springs creaked at every breath. In winter, the radiators barely pushed out heat. The boys slept in coats on top of their blankets. In summer, the low roof trapped the heat like an oven, and the sheets were soaked through by morning. The single window at the far end of the room looked out onto the forest, a dark and silent forest that seemed alive to the boys, something watching them every night. But they were together, and that mattered. Alex Davis was the most difficult among them. Sharp-tongued, always stepping into other people's fights for the sake of fairness, openly defiant towards Sister Teresa, he was thrown in the punishment room more than any of the others. The punishment room was the basement, a prayer room with a single dim bulb, no windows, a wooden crucifix on a damp stone wall. His best friend was Tommy Bright, a small freckled boy with ears that stuck out. He could whistle tunes from the radio and always broke off half his bread for whoever was smaller than him. Alex would write about him in his diary 70 years later. The best person I met in 81 years. That is not a sentiment, that is a fact. On September 14th, 1955, Alex spoke out of turn to Sister Teresa again. Again, in defense of someone younger than himself. He was taken to the basement and locked in for the night. He lay on the cold stone floor, stared at the low ceiling, listened as the home went quiet above him. Voices fading, footsteps dying away, the iron beds creaking on the third floor as the boys settled in for the night. They would not wake up in the morning. That September was heavy and restless. For days, the sky over Grant County had been a strange color, yellowish, swollen. But radio signals were rare out in that wilderness, even in good weather. No warnings, no sirens, not a single living soul for miles around. The storm came without announcement. Alex heard nothing. There were no windows in the basement. The first sign was pressure, sudden, in a single second, as if an enormous, invisible hand had squeezed the air from all sides at once. His ears went dead. He opened his mouth and screamed. He heard nothing, only a dull ache in his eardrums and the feeling that his skull was about to split apart at the seams. Then came the roar. It was not a sound in any normal sense. It was something alive and immense. 1,000 freight trains passing through one point in space at the same time. The basement ceiling shook with a fine tremor. Prayer books fell off the shelves, the light bulb flickered once, twice, then went out. In total darkness, Alex pressed himself flat against the floor. He covered his head with his hands and pushed his face into the cold stone. How long it lasted, he did not know. Time stops existing in darkness and noise. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe longer. When the roar finally died, Alex lay still for a long time. He listened to the silence. He tested it, made sure it was real, made sure the building was still standing, made sure he was still alive. Then he felt his way to the stairs in the dark, climbed them, pushed open the basement door. The third floor was gone. The roof and the ceiling had collapsed straight down, onto the dormitory, onto the iron beds, onto the sleeping boys. The concrete floor they slept above had held the weight for a moment, then given way completely. The outer walls had held. The brick had survived. But everything inside, above the second floor, had come down. Through the gaps blown in the second floor walls, Alex could see the gray light of early dawn. The smell of wet earth, split timber, and something heavy and sweet hung unmoving in the air. Alex called their names, all 15, one by one, over and over again. Tommy, Jack, Pete, Sammy, little Lou with his crooked tooth, red-headed Fred who was afraid of the dark, quiet Charlie who never cried. No one answered. Of the 15 boys at the Cape of Hope, exactly one survived that night. The one who had been punished. The one who had been locked in the basement for talking back. The building was later repaired, renovated. The home operated for a few more years until another storm in 1978 damaged the roof again. After that, no one fixed it. It was closed. Abandoned. But the question that was born in the early morning light of that day in 1955, why him and not them? Alex Davis would carry inside himself for the next 71 years. His entire life was a monstrous, elaborate irony. Alex Davis became a sharp, relentless journalist, a cynic who despised mysticism, laughed at ghost stories, and won regional awards for his investigations into corruption in children's institutions. He wrote about the cruelty of the system, about the children this system breaks. No one in his newsroom knew that he had grown up in one of those places himself. He never told anyone, not his colleagues, not his only wife, a woman he lived with for 7 years before she left him with a parting line that turned out to be a prophecy. "Alex, you live somewhere inside yourself, and there is no door in." She was wrong. There was a door, but it did not lead inward. It led back. Back to the terrible night of September 15th, 1955. For 71 years, Alex tried to nail that door shut. He poured whiskey on it. Good whiskey, cheap whiskey, whatever was in reach. He poured alcohol into himself by the liter, like water into a crack in an old wall, just to stop hearing the cold draft that pulled through it, from the place that used to be called the Cape of Hope. 25 years passed. It was 1980. Alex Davis had become a well-known journalist. His name was on awards, and a bottle of bourbon sat in his desk drawer for the days when the memories got heavier than he could carry. From a colleague, almost by accident, he learned the news. The Cape of Hope, patched up and reopened after the catastrophe of 1955, had been closed for good. The 3-story building stood abandoned at the edge of the forest. Alex picked up his heavy reporter's camera and drove out there. He told himself he was going for a story, but the truth was simple and merciless. All those years, he had been looking for an answer to one single question. Why had the storm that night taken all of them, but spared him? He stopped the car at the rusted iron gates. Silence all around. Weeds waist high. The words Cape of Hope had eaten through with rust, but they were still holding. The windows of the building stared back at him through black, broken gaps. The moment Alex stepped through the front door, a sharp, nauseating smell hit him. Tar soap, the kind used to scrub the boys raw every Saturday. That smell had no business being here. The home had been empty for more than 2 years. But the air was soaked with it, as if someone, just around the corner, was filling a basin with hot water right now. Alex walked the long, dim corridor of the first floor. His footsteps echoed off peeling walls. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Old children's things lay scattered across the floor. Yellowed exercise books. A small leather shoe, worn down on one side. In the middle of the hallway, coated in gray dust, stood a rusted children's pedal horse. Its pedals were frozen mid-turn, but Alex had the feeling the little iron wheels had been turning quietly just a second before. On the wall in the entrance hall hung a large wooden display board. Behind cracked glass, a group photograph from 1954 still held on. The paper had warped with damp. The children's faces had darkened. Water stains had soaked into the emulsions so deeply, it looked as though the dead boys in the photo were crying black tears. Alex leaned in close and stopped breathing. From the third row, ears slightly sticking out, Tommy Bright was looking back at him, looking and smiling, the same smile Alex had not seen in 25 years. He raised his hand toward the board, almost touching the glass with his finger. And then the photograph changed. Tommy, in the picture, slowly raised his hand. He reached it forward, straight toward the glass, straight toward Alex's palm. The smile widened. Alex pulled his hand back. He closed his eyes. He counted to 3. He opened them. The boy in the photograph stood still, hands at his sides, eyes straight into the lens. No movement. Just an old, faded photograph on a damp wall. Alex stood in front of the board for another minute. His heart was hammering at the base of his throat. He told himself it was a trick of the light. Too many years of whiskey. He gripped his camera tighter and forced himself up the half-collapsed staircase to the third floor. There was no roof above his head, only gray autumn sky and the overhanging branches of old trees. The floor groaned and sagged under every step. In the corner, among the debris of fallen beams and rotted lath, stood 2 surviving iron beds with sunken springs. Alex walked slowly to the center of the room. Each step cost something, not physical effort, but something else. The air was different here, thick with a presence. Despite the building having been empty for years, he raised the camera, trained the lens on the beds, and then they creaked. Slowly, softly, both at once. The springs bent and pulled with a quiet metallic groan, as if invisible sleeping children were shifting on them right now. The sunken coils sang a familiar nighttime song, the same one Alex had heard every night on the third floor when he was a boy. He did not lower the camera. He kept filming. Then, from the corners, beneath the whistle of wind through the gap where the roof used to be, a whisper rose. Not one voice, a chorus. Children's voices cutting across each other, rustling, layering one over the next. They filled the room from every direction at once, from below, from above, from inside the walls. And they did not call him by his name. They called him by the only name one person in the world had ever used for him. Lex, you came. Lex, don't go. Lex, we're here. We're waiting for you in the bedroom. Alex held the camera. His hands were shaking, but he held it. Then, in the far corner of the room, beside the second bed, against the wall, something changed. The air thickened, darkened. Out of that thickened air, a figure began to take shape. Small, thin, with ears that stuck out. Tommy stood in the corner and looked at him. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply stood and looked, with the same smile as in the photograph downstairs. And slowly, very slowly, he raised his hand and pointed at something behind Alex's back. Alex turned around. There was no one behind him. When he turned back, the corner was empty. He filmed the empty corner for a few more seconds. Then he lowered the camera, walked out of the room. Without looking back, he went down the stairs and out of the building into the gray autumn air. He got into his car, closed the door, sat for a long time with his hands on the wheel, staring at one point. Then he drove home. At home, he poured a whiskey. His hands shook so badly the glass rattled against his teeth. But then he did something he should not have done. He put the tape in the VCR and pressed play. At first, white noise, static, flickering interference on a dark screen. Then, the image began to clear. The third floor. The gray sky through the gap in the roof, 2 resty beds in the corner. Alex watched the screen. He recognized every inch of that room. And then, through the static, faces began to appear. Children's faces, blurred, indistinct, like looking through a fogged window. There were many of them. They stood inside the room in the recording Alex had shot alone. They were looking straight into the lens, straight at him, and their lips were moving. In his diary, Alex wrote that he watched the tape 4 times in a row. Each time, they said the same thing. He did not write what it was. Only one sentence. It was an address, personal, and they were not requests. They were an invitation. That night, he did not sleep. In the morning, he buried the tape at the bottom of an archive box. He stacked folders and documents on top of it. And he lived that way for 46 years. He worked, he wrote, he drank, he aged, but every night he wrote. He heard it, somewhere at the very edge of hearing, where sleep borders on waking. The iron beds quietly creaked, May 26. Alex is 81. Cancer. Third stage. Doctors gave him 3 to 6 months. He lives alone in a small house on the outskirts of Raleigh. Around him, stacks of old newspapers, archive boxes, empty bottles. The only living creature near him was an old cat that died 2 weeks before Alex himself disappeared. There is an entry in the diary about it. Even Murphy did not want to go on living with me. Smart cat. On the final pages of the diary, the handwriting changes. It becomes slower, more deliberate, as if each word cost something. Not the weakness of an old hand, but the weight of what finally needed to be said. This is what he wrote. All my life I was afraid of one word. That word was no. Because if I know, everything collapses. All my cynicism, all my professional skepticism, all the articles I wrote about a rational world. But I knew. I knew from that night on the 3rd floor in 1980. I knew when I watched the tape. I knew when I saw Tommy in the corner of the room. They were there. They are there. On the other side of something I have no word for. Good boys died that night. Tommy died. Lou died. All 15 of them died under the ceiling of the 3rd floor. And I, rude, defiant, punished, survived. I went on to live 71 years with a question I was too afraid to answer. Now the answer came looking for me. I did not survive by accident, but I used it wrong. I lived only one life, my own. A bad, drunk, cowardly life. The life of a man who was afraid to look into his own basement. I should have lived for all of them. I owe them. And I am going to pay. On June 4th, 2026, Alex Davis came to our newsroom and left the briefcase. The next day, June 5th, he hired a driver and gave him an address. Grant County, North Carolina. The edge of the forest. The old children's home. The driver's name was Ray Holloway, 42 years old. He gave a statement to the police and repeated it to us. The old man was quiet the whole way, 3 hours, not a word. He looked out the window. When we turned onto the dirt track and I saw the building, something got to me. I don't know why. Just cold inside, that's all. I stopped the car at the gates. I helped him get out. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but steady. He walked to the gates, stopped, turned back toward me, calm, the way you speak about something long decided. No need to come back for me, son. I'm home. I drove away, but something nagged at me all day. Leaving a frail old man out in that kind of wilderness, it was wrong. After 2 hours, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back. He was nowhere. I called out. I walked around the building. I went up the stairs. On the rusty swing set in the yard lay his cane, just lying there, as if he had set it down carefully before leaving. Where he could have gone on those bad legs, at his age, in that wilderness, I still don't understand. I read that statement several times. Then I took the tape out of the briefcase. I found an old VCR in the newsroom archive. I put the tape in. I pressed play. I am not going to describe everything I saw on that recording. I will say only this. Alex Davis did not lie in a single word of his diary. I watched the tape twice. After the second viewing, I went outside and stood for a long time in the cold air, looking up at the sky. Because I understood something. Alex Davis did not disappear. Alex Davis came home. There is one last page in his diary. I saved it for last deliberately. This page is different from all the others. The handwriting is different. Not the firm, careful hand of an 80-year-old man. The letters are large, uneven, different sizes, the kind of writing made by children who are just learning to hold a pen. On the page, one sentence. He came, we went home. Officially, Alex Davis is listed as a missing person. No body, no sign of crime, nothing, except a wooden cane on a rusty swing set, and a diary he personally delivered to our newsroom the day before he vanished. Sometimes what looks to us like punishment turns out to be salvation. Alex Davis spent his whole life carrying guilt for surviving, not for anything he did, not for any mistake, simply for being in the basement that night, for being punished, and for that punishment being the thing that saved his life. That is a cruel paradox. Most of us would not survive it. He survived it differently. He lived for 71 years and finally found the strength to accept what he had always known, that death is not an ending, that those we love and lose sometimes stay and wait, patiently, for as long as it takes. Tommy Bright waited 71 years, and he waited long enough. You have just heard the confession of Alex Davis. His diary and the tape are kept in our newsroom. Officially, he is missing, but you and I know the truth. Alex did not sink into a bog. He did not get lost in the forest. He did not die alone on the edge of the woods. He simply went back to where he should have stayed when he was still a boy, to his Cape of Hope, with his friends, with Tommy.